be inspired by tonight's proceedings and then come back again next Friday, June 12th, and again on Friday, July the 17th, which is just on the weekend that the show closes. This evening, Janet and Seth will talk about the formal and social concerns of photographers for whom the city of San Francisco has been their subject, and they'll also focus on aspects of Janet's exhibition and consider how the work fits into a history of photography in San Francisco and the Bay Area. While the South of Market project has been exhibited in various guises in past years, most notably at San Francisco Camera Work and at the San Francisco Arts Commissions in the 1980s, this is the first time that the depth and range of the work has been presented in a museum. And as the city's art museum, we're very proud to be hosting the exhibition, and it's been a great pleasure to have worked on it with Janet to make it happen, and also very importantly with my colleague Erin O'Toole, the Associate Curator at SF MoMA, who was instrumental really in bringing the first edition of the book into being, and was a great supporter of this work from its inception. I know you all know our special guests tonight, but I'm just going to introduce them anyway. Janet Delaney, as you know, is a photographer and teacher, educator based here in Berkeley. She received her MFA from the San Francisco Art Institute and has taught photography extensively throughout the Bay Area. And for the last 14 plus years, she's been an adjunct lecturer in visual studies at UC Berkeley. Her photographic projects have garnered many awards, most notably 3 National Endowment for Arts grants. Her photographs are held in public and private collections throughout the United States, as well as in Europe and Brazil. And she's also exhibited her work nationally in solo and group exhibitions. This is the 2nd edition of her book, South of Market. The museum produced this in record time a few weeks ago. And if you haven't already got a copy, please buy one and support Janet and support the museum with it. It's very affordable, and I'm really proud to have it out there. We're also very proud to have acquired a portfolio of Janet's work for the museum's permanent collection, and that's a really strong and important addition to our holdings. Our second very special guest tonight is Seth Curcio, who's an Associate Director at Pier 24 Photography here in town. And he began working with Pier 24 in 2010 and has contributed to the production of 5 exhibitions and directed a diverse range of the organization's catalogues, publications, and programs. Before joining Pier 24, he served as the director of Redux Contemporary Art Center in Charleston, South Carolina, where he organized over 30 exhibitions and numerous public programs. In 2006, he founded the online contemporary arts publication Daily Serving and served as an editor-in-chief until 2013, publishing over 2,500 articles, interviews, and reviews. And he's written widely on contemporary art and photography for publications as diverse as the Aperture and the British Journal of Photography. We're really pleased to have him as part of our community here in the Bay Area. So I want you to join me in giving a very warm welcome to our 2 special guests, and I'm now going to invite Janet up to the podium. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much. It was a little hectic, but it seems like it's worked out. Everybody's here. I'm really honored to be here. It wouldn't have happened without the help and support of many, many people. And thank you especially to Erin O'Toole, who kind of put me on the map, so to speak, and Julian, who has followed up. And especially tonight to Kevin Cheng and Renee Balducci, who has made this whole thing run. So I wanted to start by introducing a few people who have made this special effort to come here tonight. The purpose of the South of Market Project has always been to bring people together and to help people get to know where they live, to understand a sense of place. I decided that one of the most effective ways to do that this evening would be to invite some of the very amazing people I had the beauty to know while I was working on this project. And I'm going to start by introducing Bobby Washington, who is here with her daughter Anya, and she has been in the gallery in the front row here. So thank you very much, Bobby. Bobby was, in a way, a kind of a teacher to me. I would hang out at her house, not that frequently, but enough to make a few bad photos and one or two good ones. And, you know, when you descend on somebody's house with a 4x5, you know that you don't really know. And then with a tape recorder, you'll see, you know, you do get to know each other pretty well. So Bobby lived a long time in the neighborhood, and she was in the gallery earlier speaking to people about it, and she'll be back in the gallery again after the exhibition. After the lecture, I should say. And then also, amazingly enough, at the opening of the exhibition in July, excuse me, that would be January, David Zazuz from Ted's Market came, and that would be David on with the mustache. And so I... Oh, well, the bigger mustache. Yeah, he was just tolerating me. I think we're probably about the same age. And, I was there in the market trying to figure out how to make a picture of this place. And he and his father were both quite generous with their time. And he has continued to be. And he has allowed Angela Johnson from KALW to do tape recording with him, as has Bobby, because she's following in my footsteps, actually, and continuing to record in the neighborhood. So my dearest friend, Laura Graham, was my roommate during the time that I was building this portfolio and working on this project. And definitely I'm going to have a round of applause for Laura. Because, Laura was working full-time, she was a full-time student, she was a filmmaker, and at the end of her day, I would stick a tape recorder in her hand and say, we're going back out. I just have a few people we need to document. And she was kind enough to follow me and to follow my lead and to help me put this project together. And then Connie Hatch, another amazing part of this project, has also come up from LA. Both Laura and Connie made the special trip up. And Connie and I hatched the project South of Market together. I guess that's the word. We got together at a moment in time that was quite volatile in the history of San Francisco, and so I really just need to pay particular homage to the intellectual capacities that Connie brought to this story. So thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so with that warm-up, I feel that I can move now to Seth, who's going to carry the ball forward for us. So, Seth?
Hi, can you all hear me? All right, wonderful. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to thank Janet for inviting me to be here this evening and to have the opportunity to speak with her, and for the DeYoung who organized this event and events that will be coming afterwards. To get an understanding of the South of Market series, I really want to talk with Janet a little bit about what came before the series and how the series impacted work that came afterwards. So I'm curious, talk to me a little bit about what was going on before you moved to Soma. What were some of the influences that you had? Yeah, I'm curious, who the artists were that influenced you and sort of the social issues that you may have been interested in and some of the travels that have occurred.
Okay, thank you. I would have to say in answer to that I fell in love with photography at a very early age. I would say I was probably about 17 when I saw my first photograph that came out of a darkroom, and I immediately realized that I needed to follow that intuition and to study photography. I went to San Francisco State, which was a pretty classical place to study, and while I was there, I had the good fortune of learning about a couple of different photographers, Atget, everybody's favorite, and Walker Evans. So my vocabulary started at an early age between these two, and a heavy dose of Louis Baltz, who I didn't actually call out in a slide here. So a lot of formalism, a lot of structure in my work right off the bat. And I think that worked well for a shy student who was happy photographing blank walls. So I went from there, and I had an epiphany when I found this photograph by Thank you, Dan. I knew that. I was getting there. Robert Adams. And I think when I try to grapple with Robert Adams' work, it was so banal, just like those walls were, but there was always something in it that just changed the ground a little bit under my feet when I looked at it. Perhaps because, this picture by Stephen Shore, the suburbs were being called out, and the kind of the lonely environment that I had sort of grown up in, a very kind of plain sensibility, was being made into art, and I think I was quite taken by that. So those were some of my language. I think when I looked back recently to get ready for this lecture through everything I'd ever done, I didn't bring it all in, that I realized I took a long time to learn how to make a picture. A lot of graphics, a lot of working with graphics. And then I found my last one here, which was Dorothea Lange, who actually said something very powerful with her photographs. I didn't do that. Okay. Would that be your next question?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know you took a bit of a break from living in San Francisco between undergrad and grad, and you did some traveling, and you went to Central America, I should say, and I'd love to hear about some of the experiences that you had there and how it impacted the work that you were making before you returned to San Francisco.
Okay. I think making these kinds of journeys is not uncommon to, getting a backpack full of medium format film and heading on the bus to Panama is terribly common, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. I didn't have a return ticket, but I had a vague plan that I would learn a new language, because one of the things that was very important to me during that period between undergraduate and graduate school was learning about semiotics, kind of a fun topic. And the people that I was hanging out with, you saw Hal Fisher's photographs and Lou Thomas. They were very abstract, and they were getting quite conceptual. It was sort of the beginning of conceptual art, and I'm kind of a literal person. So when it came to learning a new language and to understand language, I thought, well, I'll just go down to Central America and learn how to speak Spanish, and that will help me understand semiotics. Which it did, actually. I think it really had a profound effect on my understanding of how we correspond with one another and how we carry visual as well as emotional language. So most of my photographs continued in the vein of the blank wall. Meanwhile, I was learning an incredible amount about the politics, because it happened to be a very heightened time in Central America. A lot of civil war was going on. I spent a lot of time in Guatemala and in Nicaragua during those 6 months. And I have one picture that I like. I'm happy to share it.
And then, so after you traveled through Central America, you returned to San Francisco, and I'm interested in two things. I'm interested in the work that you were making at that point before you moved to South Market, or really began to engage in that work. But I'm also interested in how San Francisco was for you at that particular moment. You mentioned Hal Fisher and some of the artists that were making work in the area, and I'd love to just hear about what it was like to live in San Francisco at that moment as a young artist.
Cheap. You could afford to live here. I could safely say I worked 2/3 time, and I could pay the rent. But there were not many things to spend money on. I never took a taxi or an Uber or a Lyft or anything. But I could find parking. So, it kind of works out. So I would say that it was a lively time and also a difficult time, because there were not many jobs. The economy was depressed. The city was undergoing a big transformation. And where I moved to South Market because the rent was the cheapest place that I could find. And the rents were starting to go up. My rent was twice what the person before me was paying, so it had risen more than 100% in between one tenant and the next. And that meant I paid $200 instead of $100. So that period of time was kind of free-ranging. I can't even find the places I used to go. When I go back to South Market now, it's just gone. So
it's amazing how things are cyclical in that way.
Let's hope they don't get us depressed again.
Yeah. And so you began to make some work when you got back before the Southwood Market work. And I'd love to talk about a little bit of that and have a chance to see and share an image or two, perhaps.
Okay. Okay, so this idea of transition has always been a really important one. The idea of something, what's missing and what's present. So I began a portfolio of work, probably had in the back of my mind that I would go to graduate school after Central America, and I thought I needed a new portfolio because it had already been a month or two. Remember when you were young? So I thought, okay, I'll start all over again. And I made this photograph and this photograph. And at this point, I was starting to crawl around empty and abandoned buildings looking for evidence of the fact that people had been there. So I wasn't yet photographing anyone, but I was hinting at the fact that people existed. When I looked through, I was getting warmed up here. When I looked through my old photographs just today, I was trying to find one more photograph, and I realized I have a lot of photographs of studios that were under construction. I think this is Donnelly Phillips' studio, and maybe the Hams building. But yeah, people were living really camping out, squatting almost, in very temporary style stuff. But with this idea of transition, I was also thinking about construction sites. And I have boxes full of contact sheets of construction site photographs, none of which really elevated to the level of art. But while I was here in the, inside the Moscone Center photographing, I began to think about what was going on beyond the construction site. I was working here with Catherine Wagner, who made pictures of the Moscone Center that are sublime. They really, they transcend, and as did a lot of the work that she did at the same time I was standing next to her, not making those pictures. It's so fascinating what you learn when you photograph with someone else. But I ultimately left construction sites, and I started the project, Southwood Market.
And it's interesting to think about it's interesting to think about the previous work, looking at transitional sites, things that happened before, things that were about to happen, and apply those ideas to Southwood Market itself at a moment of extreme transformation, where when you moved into Southwood Market, this process had already begun. So you were able to witness the beginning effects of gentrification and development in the area. But I'd like to hear, what beyond the cheap rents, what made you move to Southwood Market, and what were some of your initial experiences as you were absorbing that area before you began to perhaps, turn your camera towards it?
Well, pictures help. I put the slideshow together, and I tried to not use any of the pictures that were in the show, just to kind of make a point. That, just because it didn't get in the show, it might still be, but this one is in the exhibition. So it was just a test for myself as much as anything. That's my car, the Volkswagen, and that was the sign that greeted Laura and I when we would come home. And Susan Felter, who you may have seen her pictures, she was very much a part of our household on Langton Street, because I had set up a darkroom in my bedroom, basically. I slept someplace else. And Susan and I shared the darkroom. We set up a Creonite color processor, so it was quite a big investment in terms of space and noise and the like. So the idea behind my mentioning all that is that Southwood Market was where the artists lived. It was definitely a lot of warehouse spaces that were becoming part of the culture. And there were alternative galleries starting. 80 Langton Street was just next door. Connie Hatch had been in a studio over on 9th Street, on Mission between 8th and 9th. So everywhere you went, you felt at home. Right across the street, Jill Scott was living with, and Perry Lancaster had a studio. So I moved to Southwood Market because it was an inexpensive place to live, but it was also where the artists were definitely finding home. And it was close to downtown, so I rode my bike. I was the only one on a bike. I had to ride on the sidewalk because people didn't know how to navigate. And I rode down to Battery to work at a photo lab for art prints. So that was pretty much my life. Laura Graham, remember coming home from the laundromat on 6th Street, And she said, well, I had to ask a guy to get out of the dryer so I could put my clothes in, and then we decided we should go to the Mission. It was worth it just to go over to the Mission to the laundry, where there's a little more room.
Well, when I moved to San Francisco maybe 6 years ago, I learned a lot about the city through looking at photographs. From the history of the city, the 1906 earthquake, through Arnold Gint's photos, to the building of the Bay Bridge with Peter Stackpole. Being, of course, at Pier 24 gave me the opportunity to just sort of really immerse myself in the history of the city through photography. And I've been interested, as I'm looking at these photographs, to think about how maybe these photographers began to understand their place and their practice while making these images. Learning about the community that they lived in while actively engaging in the act of photographing. And I was curious about the process as you began to photograph in South of Market. What types of things did you learn about yourself and about the community that you were living in?
Well, that's a very good question. I think I photograph to remember, and also to become more intimate. I think as a teenager, I first started to take the camera out because it gave me a sense of identity. And that same idea held forth when I was photographing South of Market, because I could use this view camera as a kind of a point of entry. And, I was on the street working, everyone else was working, and I could just sort of wander into the auto shop or to the cafe and just be another person working and engage with people in this very intimate and at the same time exciting way, because it was like theater in a way. It was live, impromptu, improvisational. So that I got to know the city very, very well with that project. And it continues to make me feel at home because I know that place. I photographed it, and then I looked at the print for a long time afterwards. So it gets imprinted.
And did the use of using a large format view camera afford you the opportunity to sort of slow down and further build relationships with the subjects? I know a lot of the images you have just an amazing sense of intimacy and connection with the subject in a way that you can tell, at least it seems to me, that there was a true, genuine bond, even for just a moment. And I'm wondering if the act of using that type of camera afforded you that, or if it was just maybe something with your charismatic personality.
Well, I think whenever you tell someone hold still, it's going to take a few seconds. People get more present. They have to focus on what you're doing, and it was not every day that somebody would come into your business with a view camera. And I don't know who did those pictures. When I look at them, I can't imagine having the chutzpah. I'm trying now again, but it was the act of somebody young and enthusiastic. I don't know much more about her than that. I keep trying to find her again. Yeah.
Well, and I think it seems to me that as a continuation of that, you were also interested in really capturing the voice of these individuals, both by giving them a voice through the pictures, but also literally recording them and developing quite a lot of ephemera material that sort of helped support the project. And I'm curious sort of the relationship between some of that ephemera and the photographs themselves, and sort of how you feel about the totality of them and how they work with one another.
I think at the base of everything, I'm a storyteller. I learned that from my mother, who had an amazing memory and could recall every detail of her life, and sometimes painful details. So the idea of talk story, so to speak, became very important to me. And I also felt when I was making these portraits, these scenes, that I wanted to tell the story of this particular neighborhood to a city that didn't seem to pay any attention. And I'll move on to this next picture, thankfully for you. I like a lot of pictures if I can do it. This is the way South of Market looked for many, many years, and I'm sure many people in this room remember driving through South of Market and just continuing, because there was no literally there. They had scraped it away. There had been a major neighborhood, a very big working class neighborhood, very well documented by Dorothea Lange during the Depression, where the poor lived inside the boundaries of the city. So when I arrived south of Market, that was gone, and I wondered what had been there, who had lived there, And I knew from Ira Nowinski's work, which you may have seen a bit of, No Vacancy, he documented the homes and the apartments of the men, mostly a few women, who lived in the residential hotels that had been moved away. So my goal with telling stories was to give a voice to the people who were living there now, who I knew their time was limited. I could feel the impact of the Moscone Center. It was like a slow tsunami arriving from the bay, and sure enough, most people have left. In fact, even when I was doing this project, that act was in process, and I photographed somebody being evicted right as they were packing up their plastic bags and moving on. So we all knew that something was happening. We didn't exactly know what was going to happen. When I was coming home from grad school one night, I saw this scene unfolding, and I think this was one of the very last residential hotels, the Imperial Hotel, which was being demolished. And I looked at that wallpaper, especially because I had to print it, and it took a long time to get the color right. But this is like a 10-minute exposure, and I thought a lot about who put the wallpaper up and who lived in that place and what it meant to lose your home. About the time I was doing these first initial photographs, I was also studying everything I could find about the history of South of Market. And so the book, No Vacancy, by Ira Nowinski was pivotal in my understanding what had been removed. And doing research on a project always helps inform my work. And I also read Yerba Buena, Land Grab and Community Resistance by Chester Hartman. And those two books really helped to frame my story. But the interviews also gave me a lot of information. So I interviewed the father of Phil Kiley, who's a fireman who lived on Clara Street, and his home was taken over by eminent domain. His father saved all the newspaper clippings that went on during that battle. So I went out to Forest Hills, someplace towards the ocean, and I interviewed him. Connie Hatch was with me. You may remember this, Connie. And it was wild. I mean, he just was really upset. And we took all his clippings home and photographed them and returned them. But those stories and hearing his passion about his experience in that sense of neighborhood that he'd had and lost was really important for me.
And I think at that point you can really begin to get a sense that, not only were you interested in sort of documenting and preserving this area and the people, but you also had a strong sense of social and political activism being a part of the work. It seems like that's sort of, in many ways, the backbone of what was driving or the impetus for, for creating a lot of these images. And I'm wondering why, while you were producing the work, ultimately, what did you hope or think would be sort of a result of it? I mean, obviously, when you're working, you have aspirations, you think things are going to be a particular way. And I'm just curious, given that particular time and place, what were you hoping would result?
I was 28. I thought I'd change the world. I had a few months. We were very enthusiastic. I have a couple of comments in the slides that come up for that. I know that my intention was to make beautiful photographs of a neighborhood that people were not paying attention to, and that I wanted to draw focus to the lives of those in San Francisco who pretty much didn't have a voice. If they'd had a voice, they probably wouldn't have had the Moscone Center. I mean, they didn't put the Moscone Center in North Beach. I mean, they didn't put it in Pacific Heights, right? Those are nice locations. They put it South of Market, nicer, easier. So I felt that the work had a job to be circulated in community meetings and to have some kind of a lobbying point. In fact, we didn't have the internet. it didn't work out the way I'd hoped. I felt very frustrated ultimately by my efforts, and I made a couple of successful, presentations. Connie and I did something at Canyon Kip that was sort of a newsworthy event that brought out the, ABC, NBC, what have you, and I think KPFA did a piece, but the kind of information dissemination we have now just wasn't in place. And so, I probably was sitting there thinking, well, 30 years from now, show at the Dion, maybe we could do something, right? I always think of long-term aspirations. And, and photography, I think I can say honestly, not glibly, that I always in the back of my head said, well, at least these are going to one day have a historical context. But I also finished that sentence and said, but I don't want them to lose their meaning and just be pretty pictures of the past. And so that's why I'm really thrilled, to have the show and the book with the text and the stories, but also that these 3 nights that the Friday night at the museum have offered us the opportunity to continue the conversation beyond just the art, but also to invite city planners, urban people, our people from the arts, to see how can we make our city have that dynamic quality that we love so much. We don't have to lose all of it. So I told stories. So these guys have sort of... Thank you. Yeah, one by one, all of us together. Steve Rue, the gentleman here with the jean jacket, and his 2 friends, and Bobby probably knows their names. I have to get those because her father was often standing there on the corner also. They taught me a lot about what was going on in the city, and by getting to know them and seeing the city through their eyes, they were on the corner every single day. And I don't even know that they lived there anymore, so much as that they came back to hang out there because that was a familiar place. And then these people, Bobby's apartment unfortunately burned down, but I took pictures of her pictures, so you have a few pictures now, and I'll be getting, I don't know, I know you know these people. Yes. So our life through photographs is so important. But just wanted to get ahead to this one, which was a flyer that went out, and it says, will Yerba Buena help destroy South of Market? Well, Yerba Buena was the name of the Moscone Center before Moscone was assassinated, during the time when Moscone was actually opposed to the Moscone Center. But, that's politics, right? Yeah, no, Moscone's fantastic, and you can really understand his position if you read the book, Season of the Witch. It has a really great discussion about it, and also The Cool Gray City of Love gives you a great background in a lot of this. But I think this is the flyer for the piece that Connie and I participated in. And so we made a few efforts, and then we had an exhibition at Camera Work, and people just flooded to this exhibition. It was chaos, and I kind of remember a fight, but I don't know much more.
Well, I think it's a true testament to the power of the work that, some decades later that we can revisit it, and it elicits this, a strong emotional reaction, at least with me viewing it, but I think with a lot of people, and people identify with it, and I think on a formal level, the pictures have continued to be seductive and beautiful and intriguing, and I think on a social level, they continue to be relevant and provide a new entry point for people to consider their role and place in the city, as it's often, I feel at least I, myself can feel like I'm both impacted by the changes that are happening within the city, the rent hikes, and at the same time, I wonder what role I play in perpetuating that. And so I think that this work has really given me an opportunity to sort of examine, personally, my place within San Francisco. And I think that's just a testament to the power of it so many decades, later. Well,
that's exactly what I'm hoping for. And mainly, whenever I run into somebody who's new, I just remind them, to vote, to read the newspaper. I know it's so quaint, but, to pay attention to what's going on in the city government. I have a few more photos just to kind of flesh out what was happening. There's a casket factory, and there were a lot of casket factories, interestingly enough, one on Langton Street at 80 Langton, and this one was around the corner on Folsom and 6th. And This is the People's Construction, and this space was owned, and it still is, I think, by Philip Kiley, the fireman, and he maybe had a cabinet shop there. But here's like a time warp moment. I have a daughter, too, one that's 24 and another's 26, almost 27, and she said, I'm going to a party, an event for doulas, which is her thing, and I said, and she goes, you want to come? It's on Langton Street. And I was like, time compressing. It's like, Langton Street? And then she shows up, and this has been turned into like a hacker hostel or something like that. But not quite. It's like now, Langton Labs, right? No, it's a real thing. And there are a lot of very smart people that go to Burning Man that live here and do interesting things, and they've completely reformatted it. And I want to go back and photograph in it again. I've snuck a few pictures, but I have big plans. So, at any rate, it's exciting what changes. So there, I brought that one for you. That's Chester. I just found his name on a negative today. I just had it at the Helen Cafe, but it's actually Helen and her husband, Chester.
Yeah, I love this picture. I think it really allows me to sort of project myself into the image, to have a seat at the bar, and to sit and be at that particular place. I think it's a great illustration of how to sort of articulate a sense of place and put someone sort of there in the moment.
You could still go here. It's still a restaurant.
Oh, yes.
And you might not, right? It has bars and it looks a little greasy, but it did then too. And, so I invite you to go back to that 6th Street restaurant and have lunch there, right? And you can get your hair cut at Giannini's next door, only it's not Giannini's anymore. It's a different kind of hair salon. So of all the places that I photographed, this one really hasn't changed, just the ownership has changed. So I'm always keeping an eye on my...
It's amazing how that happens. I walked down Folsom Street to get lunch at a spot on 2nd and Folsom, and on my way back and forth, I passed by the blacksmith every time. And I was just there with one of my coworkers the other day and stopped and walked in and peered in. It looks like the place hasn't changed at all in decades.
No, I don't think it's legal to change that place. I think there's a plaque out front that says this will never change. Yeah, but this one was being sold, and I went here a few times, and I got to know these guys. They're making statues, but I was very interested in the one that was inside, and the newspaper article that was sort of next to it. This kind of confluence of Asian and Western culture, and I think it has remnants of another photographer's work. Can you name the photographer? Only because I can't remember his name. But he makes sets. Come on.
Thomas Dumont?
No,
makes sets.
Big sets. And filmic. And then...
Jeff Wall? Crudson.
5 points.
Yes,
Crudson, right? Sorta, right? A little, except I didn't build... No, yeah. But there's no, irony other than the newspaper. Okay. So one more shout out to artists. This used to be an entire warehouse full of artists. This is a building that's on 10th and Howard. And they were just in the process of being evicted right there. It was called Project One. And the whole place was floor-to-ceiling chaos. I found one organized studio, and that's in the exhibition, Artist in Her Studio. She was the only one who picked up. But I found these. These didn't look too bad. These are 2 Italians, and you can tell they had the pack of cigarettes there. But at any rate, they were inside Project One. And then this was my upstairs neighbor. On the weekends, I think he wore all leather. I thought a lot of people lived upstairs. And then I realized it was this one person or two with many different tasks. And yeah, so it was interesting, yeah. Yeah, South of Market. Yeah, his roommate used to clean the front porch with a whip. It was impressive, too. Okay, so yeah, it was an interesting place, and I think there's, probably Oakland now, very interesting. But I'm going to switch kind of awkwardly, only because they're both red, to this picture. which is actually the scene of a really horrible event. But I wanted to include this photograph because I think the fire represents one of the flashpoints of what was happening south of Market, in the sense of it being destabilized. The fire department had just been closed around the corner, and so when this fire started, it raged out of control, because I think what I understand from the news, and we can find out more from some firsthand experience, that it became a bigger fire than it might have, but the fire department, the trucks had to come from further away. And about 120 people were left homeless as a result of this fire. And I bring this in, and then this is a photograph by Connie Hatch, who was working very closely with me and did a very elaborate project around the fire, using it as a kind of a point of entry into the conversation of political issues of the city, and the fact that there was this amazing unequal distribution of wealth at that moment in time. And one of the big issues for me personally was that the fire was pegged erroneously on the gay community because of some of the kinds of activities that they uncovered when they were cleaning up the fire. And indeed, it had been an arson fire set by a disgruntled house painter. But the gay community was singled out. And I don't forget how much homophobia, but this was a real moment for me to understand San Francisco's turning point, where the announcement was, this is, probably as a result of rush, or amyl nitrate, but in fact it wasn't. But then there was a hotel nearby that opened up their doors and brought help to a lot of the people who were displaced, and in fact not being the cause of the fire, but being very much in support of. And then this, we're getting near the end here of the past, but I don't think I could talk about South of Market without this overview that sort of puts things in context. But this one probably sums it up, and this is the last photograph or the last image that I'm bringing in. There is some memorabilia in the vitrine, and this came to my door somehow. I don't know how I got it, but it was a schedule for a Spur conference on the conditions of South of Market. They were sort of opening up New Frontier, called South of Market.
Well, you sort of began to wrap up this series in the early mid '80s, and you've made many other images since then. And I'd love to take an opportunity to look at and think about some of those images and consider how working in South of Market and the things that you've learned through that process and the relationships that you built impacted the way that you viewed the world moving forward. So maybe we can take a few moments and look at some of that.
Oh, how'd that happen? Oh, yes, this is my travel log. So, South of Market was a really important point for me. And I sometimes think about, as I was wrapping it up, it was like a difficult relationship, and it took me a long time to leave. I moved out of South of Market in '82, and I moved to the Mission, in part because I was moving in with my boyfriend at the time, and we wanted a new place, but we couldn't find anything South of Market we could afford, so we moved to the Mission. And when I was out there, I started to become very much involved with the issues around the Sandinista revolution. And so I just brought in a few pictures because in a lot of ways, when I went to Nicaragua, I brought with me a kind of a combination of having photographed at home in these kind of intimate spaces. And I was lucky enough to live with one family while I was there. I went first in '84 for Oxfam, and I photographed for them, and I met this family, and I photographed everything in black and white, and I came home and said, they should be in color, so I went back the next year and I re-photographed the entire thing in color. And they really let me into their lives, and I got to know the war and what it meant to be a small country on the wrong side of the United States government. in a large part, these photographs served to finally satiate or satisfy some of my urge to make political change, because I used these works along with others to do fundraising. Back here in the States, in San Francisco, I did a lot of house parties. Berkeley was also very good with this. And we would talk about what was happening in Nicaragua, and we raised money for the Bay Area Construction Brigade, which went down to build houses in Esteli, in the countryside, on land that had been appropriated from the absentee landlords. And so through my photographs, I was able to raise and help other people raise a great deal of money, which helped to support a group, a couple of different years' worth of men and women to go down and do this construction. And I also met my husband, so, what's to complain?
And you continued your interest in urban spaces and transitional spaces, and I know you had the opportunity to go visit several cities, New York being one of them, but also many other cities abroad. So maybe we can take a
okay. Well, it's kind of difficult to talk about New York and Managua all at once, but it's exactly what was happening. You'll notice the years are the same. So this was a kind of a time in my life when I was leaving South of Market, kind of slowly. You'll see there's still pictures as late as '86 in South of Market. But I was also going to New York City quite a bit, and I would take my rollie. It was sort of, I think I had a friend who works for DHL, and he would sort of get me free plane tickets if I would just leave at the drop of a hat and take mysterious packages. So I would just say to the place where I was working as a color printer that I had to go now, and then I would show up at the 6 a.m., the all-night flight, and I would just be unleashed onto the street, and I would photograph. And I did this over a few years, and I made a few good pictures. These pictures are actually going to be showing next June 11th. They open up at the Jules Mag Gallery on Gough Street. So you come to the opening, 149 Gough. But I made this work, and I loved this work, but I just printed it up and I put it in a box because it wasn't political, and I wasn't really sure what to do with it. It was just my love affair with a crowded street. And San Francisco doesn't really have crowded streets in the same way. I mean, Market Street's becoming that, but I just, I like the idea of the kind of total immersion that I could get from New York City. Was my escape. But then I went for the serious crowd. There's a little bit of a lag between these. Let's see, New York 87, and then I am not going to show you all my baby pictures. I had 2 kids. And then I went out and photographed a lot in trees, but we're not talking about that. But I did then get an opportunity to go to India and to Beijing within 1 year, in the same year. It was kind of it was a phenomenal year. It was a thrill. I was invited to curate a show in India of American photographers, and then I actually showed my own work in Beijing. So I was invited as an artist to go to Beijing, and it unleashed this absolute love affair with massive cities. The word a megacity or megalopolis, or there's a big word for a big city. And I was smitten, and I applied for a Fulbright. I was going to go to Bangalore. It was like there was no stopping me. Bigger, better, dirtier, more. And thankfully, at that moment, I went over to talk to Julian Cox, and he suggested an exhibition. I said, oh, well, I guess I won't go to Bangalore in the heat of the summer. I'll just stay here. And so, but also, I, at that time, I decided that I needed to look back at South of Market because I was going to do this book. That was also during these kind of intervening years. And so I went back and I looked at what South of Market had been like in my photographs, and then I started making pictures of what I saw now in South of Market. And, this transformation from the handmade painted mural to the illusion of the future, that was the corporatization of, the city as I was experiencing it, and nothing could do it better than this fashion ad that was shot in the blacksmith.
Which is still there and looks exactly the same.
Right. It's a perfect place. The patchwork shirt is $1,553 if you're interested. And you have to ask for the price of the coat on request. So these last few pictures are what I've sort of started with, photographing Soma, because I have to shorten it up, we're in a hurry. Soma now. And so this was like one that I made, I went on a walking tour with with John King, the architectural tour, and he showed me Zeno Alley and started pointing out a lot of things that were pretty fascinating. So I went back and retraced those steps and made this photograph. And then this is just outside the SF MoMA before the renovation happened. And you can kind of see in the background the sign of the flag maker.
I noticed with a lot of these images, there's a bit more distance between you and the subject than in a lot of the earlier work. And I'm curious if that has anything to do with your relationship to Soma now that you're not a resident. I mean, you're obviously completely intimately connected to the city, but how has your sort of proximity and relationship to the city affected the way that you formally construct the picture, if at all?
Well, I think, there's been this kind of political flashpoint that says if you're not from there, you can't speak about it. If you're not of that group, you can't speak, right? And when I first started photographing in South of Market, I would say this was about the closest I got. And it's not, I think it succeeds to contradict what you just said, but generally speaking, you're right. And I think that I have been circling around in South of Market. I can't park anymore. So it's getting really difficult to photograph in the old way, and the camera's really heavy, so it's hard to take BART, but I'm trying. So I'm still making distanced pictures, but I'm starting to set up appointments. I did make this one, which I felt pretty good about. And it is interesting, I photograph people who are on the street, who are homeless, and people who are working, because who else will stand still? Everything, except if you're getting a tattoo made, right? So I realized that it's no accident that these are, the service workers, because they, are holding still. But my goal is to try to get closer, and I've set, I keep saying as soon as the exhibition is finished, which has been a total pleasure, I'll have time to go out and follow up on a lot of things. I have a list, I did go to the Folsom Street Fair. And I just gave you one picture. But, we could be here all night with that. But I have spent a lot of time just transfixed by the new construction that's happening and trying to, I was, as I said, looking back through a lot of my photographs. I've photographed construction since 1975. I'm mesmerized, and I guess it's no accident I married a general contractor. So, yeah. This is the Moscone Center conference that was happening. This is, I love the address. This is 221 Main Street. So, a friend was kind enough to let me into her home, and I could watch the museum being built out her window. She has a great view of it.
Are you mainly getting access to these spaces through people that you know, or do you have?
I haven't been running ads.
Yeah.
No, I usually meet people and I file their cards, and then 2 years later I might get back to them. I just photographed a woman who's a welder, that I had met before I had my hip operated on. I couldn't get back, and then finally I was in good enough shape to be on the street. But
how do you feel the access has changed? I mean, between South of Market and the day and now, is it easier for you, or is it proving a lot more difficult to get people to allow you to photograph them and gain access into these spaces?
If I know them, it works fine. But if I show up unannounced, they are very uptight. And when I first started to try to photograph again South of Market, I realized that everybody has a buzzer. You didn't need a buzzer for an auto shop, or a print shop. You just wander in. But now, I have a network of friends. I'm making an effort because I love San Francisco. Like all these people, I'm assuming, who are here today, share our enthusiasm for the city. So the Salesforce, amazing event, very visual. And then this is the last picture, which is, I think, the beginning of, more photos about what it means to be arriving. This is my soon-to-be nephew who's moving here from Chicago with his MBA to work at Bain Consulting. And I'm happy to document that process because he represents exactly what we're interested in, right? Okay.
Well, thanks for taking the time to speak with us. I do want to leave. I want to leave some time after we leave the theater. The galleries will be open for a little bit longer, and Janet and I and many people from the South of Market neighborhood that were around when you were producing the photos originally will be available, and we're happy to chat and speak and take questions there in lieu of having them here in the auditorium. So
yeah, thank you very much, and please don't hesitate if you have more questions to approach me, get in touch, anything. I'm pretty accessible. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.